Russian military planes violated Swedish airspace on Wednesday, according to information provided by the Swedish Defense Forces. Swedish media reported that two Sukhoi Su-27 and two Sukhoi Su-24 fighter jets entered Swedish airspace east of the Baltic Sea island of Gotland, adding that the incursion was short-lived. The Swedish Air Force described the incident as being particularly serious given the current situation, and called the Russian actions unprofessional and irresponsible. Russian military aircraft often violate Swedish and Finnish airspace, but the Swedish Air Force noted that the majority of these infractions are accidental. The force said it scrambled a Jas-39 Gripen fighter jet in response to the incursion, and to identify the Russian aircraft. The incident occurred on the same day as Finnish defense forces took part in a joint military exercise organized by Sweden in the maritime area west of the island of Gotland. The drill aimed to test and develop the interoperability of the country's navies and air forces, a press release from the Finnish Defense Forces stated. Swedish Defense Ministry said, "The Russian violation of Swedish airspace is of course completely unacceptable. It will lead to a firm diplomatic response from Sweden. Swedish sovereignty and territory must always be respected." Tensions with Russia have been climbing following the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine last week. In response, 38 nations have imposed flight bans on Russian planes, and Moscow has been repeatedly hit with sanctions. Among those countries to take a stance against Russia was Sweden, whose Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, announced earlier this week that she would be sending Ukraine 5,000 anti-tank weapons along with protective gear. She said, "Sweden has not done anything like this since the Soviet Union attacked Finland in 1939. Many Swedes see it as self-evident to extend a helping hand to those who are under attack, but I know that there are also those of us who ask what consequences this will have for Sweden. Will it make us a target for Russian retaliation?" The security situation in Sweden's neighborhood has been deteriorating for several years. It has now gotten even worse. During the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Finland took part in a joint military exercise organized by Sweden in the maritime area west of the island of Gotland. At the same time, Finland's defense minister Antti Kaikkonen met with his Swedish counterpart Peter Hultqvist in Gotland to discuss the current security situation as well as cooperation. Finnish Minister Kaikkonen said, "The intensified security situation emphasizes the importance of good cooperation and joint training. We are taking care of our area." The defense ministers of both countries considered the situation very serious. Swedish Minister Hultqvist said, "It's startling. Russia has launched its first major offensive war in Europe since World War II. It is a violent insult to the Ukrainian nation and democracy. It demonstrates the nature of the Russian regime, its unpredictability, and its readiness to use military force and military violence to achieve political goals." Both Finland and Sweden have made historic decisions on arms exports to Ukraine. Finland will deliver 2,500 assault rifles, 150,000 cartridges for the rifles, 1,500 single-shot anti-tank weapons, and 70,000 combat ration packages to Ukraine. Similarly, Sweden will send 135,000 field rations, 5,000 helmets, 5,000 body shields, and 5,000 anti-tank weapons. Apparently sensing a shift among its Nordic neighbors, the Russian Foreign Ministry last week voiced concern about what it described as efforts by the United States and some of its allies to drag Finland and Sweden into NATO, and warned that Moscow would be forced to take retaliatory measures if they joined the alliance. On the other side, the Citizens' Initiative demanding that Finland apply for membership of the NATO military alliance has reached the required 50,000 signatures and will move to Parliament. The initiative, calling on authorities to apply for NATO membership under its obligation to constitutionally protected human rights, was launched on February 25 and reached the 50,000 thresholds in just under 1 week. Another NATO-based citizens' initiative demanding a referendum on the issue garnered the necessary number of signatures, having been launched on February 21, and currently has the support of over 76,000 people. The attack on Ukraine prompted both Finland and Sweden to break with their policy of not providing arms to countries at war by sending assault rifles and anti-tank weapons to Kiev. For Sweden, it's the first time offering military aid since 1939, when it assisted Finland against the Soviet Union. Separately, the United States is an important and close partner of Finland and Sweden. The three signed a trilateral statement of intent in 2018 on their defense relationship. Sweden is the first non-NATO member to acquire the Patriot missile defense system. Late last year, Finland announced its decision to buy 64 Lockheed Martin F-35 fighters to replace its aging F/A-18 fleet. Finland and Sweden are members of the EU and do not consider themselves neutral. The correct term would be militarily non-aligned. Interestingly, Lavrov omitted any reference to an adequate response on Russia's part, perhaps wanting to avoid fanning the flames of the ongoing NATO debate in both countries. Although, as that geopolitical landscape makes a paradigm shift with Russia's military intervention in Ukraine, Putin intends to achieve the Finlandization of Kyiv, or rather apply the Finnish model, in reference to the EU nations' policy of neutrality during the Cold War. France's President Emmanuel Macron, ahead of the diplomatic talks with Moscow, suggested that Finlandization might be one of the models on the table to be negotiated with President Vladimir Putin. A de facto neutral status of Ukraine, on principles of Finnish model, could take away Putin's perception of being encircled by NATO. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman suggested. NATO, however, asserts a differing stance on Ukraine being a neutrality buffer zone like that of Finland and Sweden's Cold War policies. In the post-Cold War era, Russian President Vladimir Putin fears that the Finnish-Soviet relationship during the Cold War may be shattering, and the two EU nations that share the border with Moscow may no longer shut out the Western military alliances or NATO cooperation, toppling the Finnish model that kept the hierarchical relationship between Soviet, Sweden, and Finland relatively stable. Finnish neutrality was guaranteed by the 1947 Paris Peace Treaties that mentioned the EU nation could not be a member of NATO. But as the Ukrainians desire integration with NATO and the West, soon Finland and Sweden might spin the table, posing a serious challenge to Russian security. Both countries put an end to traditional neutrality by joining the European Union in 1995 and deepening cooperation with NATO. However, a majority of people in both countries remained firmly against full membership in the alliance until Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The Nordic duo, important partners for NATO in the Baltic Sea area where Russia has substantially increased its military maneuvers in the past decade, has strongly stressed that it is up to them alone to decide whether to join the military alliance. In his New Year's speech, Finnish President Sauli Niinistö pointedly said that Finland's room to maneuver and freedom of choice also includes the possibility of military alignment and of applying for NATO membership, should we ourselves so decide. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg noted last week that for Helsinki and Stockholm this is a question of self-determination and the sovereign right to choose your own path, and then potentially in the future, also to apply for NATO. There are no set criteria for joining NATO, but aspiring candidates must meet certain political and other considerations. Many observers believe Finland and Sweden would qualify for fast-track entry into NATO without lengthy negotiations, and membership could be a reality within months. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin said this week that her Social Democratic Party would discuss possible NATO membership with other parties, but didn't set a time frame. She said everyone agrees that the events of the past weeks have been a game-changer. Sweden and Finland see cooperation with NATO as strengthening the regional stability in Northern Europe. Both countries are ready to deepen their political and defense cooperation with the organization. It is likely, however, that in the face of Russian aggression, NATO will focus on guaranteeing the security of its members, which means that even its closest partners, such as Finland and Sweden, may play a smaller role than during the past few years.